Okay. All right. So I'd like to welcome everyone to this session where we're working with our alumni. And the focus of this session is on pathways to government jobs, insights for our alumni. And so tonight we're very fortunate to have, Mandy McCarthy, who, completed her MA in anthropology and then began her doctorate in Canadian studies. Then we also have Andrew Mackenzie, who also completed his BA and MA in sociology at Carleton. And then he started at Statistics Canada after defending his thesis, which is very impressive. And then we have Christine Piche, who's a much more recent graduate of our PhD program in sociology, and now she's currently an analyst for the digital design branch at Innovation Science and Economic Development Canada. So in terms of the format that we'll be following tonight, we're going to start off with our three speakers giving 10-minute presentations, and then we'll open it up to a question and answer session. If you have any questions, immediately after one of our speakers, is doing their presentation, you can either, hold on to your question, write it down on a piece of paper, or alternatively, you can also write it down in the chat, and then when we turn to the question and answer session, we can address your questions then. But in terms of thinking about this evening, I think it'd be best just to give our speaker the opportunity to start telling us about some of their pathways into government jobs with their anthropology or sociology degree. So I'd like to begin by Mandy, if you could tell us a little bit about your experience of being recruited into the federal government.
Yes, thank you. Hello, everyone. Thank you for inviting me to be here. Happy to be here inside from the cold. So my name is Mandy McCarthy. I work for Crown Indigenous Relations and Northern Affairs Canada. I'm the Acting Director General of Settlement Agreements and Childhood Claims. And currently I'm principally responsible for the Truth and Reconciliation calls to action on the missing children and burial information. So that's where I am now. I basically joined government 15 years ago. I came in through the Recruitment of Policy Leaders program, which I'll talk about a little bit. It is a program that was developed by the Privy Council office, and the objective was to recruit and offer opportunities to perhaps those individuals that typically went into academia or think tanks and other sort of career paths. And that was the objective of it. Essentially, the Recruitment of Policy Leaders program, you apply not to a position, you apply to the program. And the program is principally to hire and place policy analysts at a mid-level to early executive, but usually at a mid-level in government. And there's three components to the application process and the program for assessment. One is demonstrating strength in academics through scholarships, through conferences, through peer-reviewed journal articles, through just sort of the academic side of things. The second pillar is about demonstrating how your experiences could contribute to developing policy in the government context. So whether that's previous job experiences, whether that's teaching courses, a component of your thesis or your dissertation, usually a combination of all of the above. And the third component is leadership. And the leadership is not necessarily demonstrated just through, governance leadership, but it could be leadership in sport, leadership in music, entrepreneurship. And so the application is those three components. And then it is a combination of the public service sort of doing the intake, and then people like myself, alumni, peer review and triage the applications through to senior people. And then the panel of those who assess who are at the assistant deputy minister level. And the objective is to get you in as a pool of candidates of which at that point, your biography is made public for public servants to be able to access. It's promoted within the government, and you're assigned a government employee who helps you navigate through the interview process and to meet people in different departments in order to potentially land a policy position. So that's the process that I came in. I did start my doctoral research and had completed most of it before I started government, and I'll be openly admit that my career path took me in a different direction, and I didn't complete, but it was a large contributing factor to why I was actually offered the positions I was offered. I was offered a couple of different positions. I entered at a point in which in those who had experience in Indigenous law, history, research, community engagement was highly sought after, as it was quickly becoming a gap. My master's was in anthropology on the Native American Grave Protection and Repatriation Act. And my doctoral work was on the negotiation of culture and language in modern treaty negotiations in Canada. And with a combination of the two, my entry job coming into government was working for Canadian Heritage, basically managing I came in as a policy analyst and then became the manager of all of the negotiations in Canada regarding culture, heritage, and language provisions within modern treaties. So great fit for me. I think at that point, I'll just talk a little bit about where my career path has gone, and then a little bit of sort of what I've learned along the way. And so from there, I went into Aboriginal cultural and language programming. From there, I went into strategic policy then it was Indigenous and Northern Affairs Canada. I took a swerve over to Parks Canada and kind of went back to a little bit of my roots on repatriation and responsible for the Historic Sites and Monuments Board, heritage buildings, lighthouses, those sorts of things. It was a rather large sort of portfolio, and also was a part of supporting the Canadian delegation for the World Heritage Committee. I've sort of landed back at CERNAC, originally coming back through the strategic policy route, and then was sort of offered this position. And then this position I'm in right now was created for me with all of the tragic announcements that have taken place over the last 10 months. So just a couple of tips on my entry path coming in is, I'll admit I applied to the Recruitment of Policy Leaders program because my SSHRC grant was ending and we were thinking of getting a mortgage. So that was a part of my strategic thinking of maybe getting into government. And so I was very relaxed in the situation, in the sense that people are not looking for necessarily in government just strict core subject matter experts. There are also looking for those that can contribute to a team dynamic, those who can contribute to strategic thinking and helping the government situate the priorities of responding to speeches from the throne, mandate letters, and helping senior management and ministers navigate that. So it's a varied skill set that people are looking for, but it is a combination. And increasingly the combination, in my perspective, on the sociology and anthropology side is becoming more intriguing for hiring managers. So I think it's a question of demonstrating that you're more than your thesis, more than your subject matter, and that because you've gone through the process you've demonstrated research skills, analytical skills, writing skills, communication skills, and through many graduate experiences, you've been supervising or teaching assistants and working with a community of others. I think the other thing to mention is that it's a question of you understanding what it is you're looking for. And one of the hardest things is the entry into government. And then once you enter into government, the possibilities are massive of being able to move freely between departments. The sheer number of job opportunities that are open to you are, tenfold from what you have access to outside the public service. And so sometimes it's about picking and choosing whether or not this is a good job for now versus thinking that you're locking yourself into a full career. For some people, they go through like a 2-3 year kind of cycle of moving on in their career. So maybe you may not have the opportunity that is your best fit, but maybe it's a really good fit for the moment. And you can't argue against the salary ranges and benefits right at the entry level. And I think that the last thing I think I would just like to say is that it's funny, but I will share. I did have 4 job opportunities when I came in through RPL, and people sort of mocked me because I picked the lowest paying, most inconvenient job as the career option. But it really aligned with what I'd been doing at Carleton at the time, and how much energy and time I'd invested in becoming a subject matter expert on that. And I chose the level because I knew that it would give me the space to be able to learn how to work in government and learn government process, government language, and what's expected of me before it becomes expected of me. And I have to say, I came in as a level 4, and within two years, I was a level 7. And I think taking that sort of step back and saying, I think I'll come in as a junior person and be a sponge and just learn from my colleagues and learn from the environment was probably one of the better decisions I made. And it allowed me to get to where I want quite quickly with less effort, I would say, than struggling and battling against constantly worrying about meeting expectations. The higher you go in, the higher the expectations that you're going to understand government process right off the bat. So I will just sort of share one anecdote. As I was sharing with Blair the other day, it was just an interesting story. I used my background quite a bit right from the get-go, because the culture and heritage chapters all talk about repatriation, and I've been working on the repatriation of Indigenous cultural matters for quite some time. And but I haven't really ever had a real direct conversation until a week ago when I was in a meeting with the minister and the deputy minister. And our minister has been on a virtual tour of Manitoba and sort of brought up the fact that with one of the Indigenous groups that he'd met with, they talked about this NAGPRA. And what is this NAGPRA? And it's federal legislation in the States, but they were quite keen on it, and he wanted to look at it. And my deputy just sort of was like looking very perplexed. He's like, I'm sorry, I've never heard of this. And sort of said, Bandy, do you know about this? As a matter of fact, my master's in anthropology was on this piece of legislation. Ask any question you would like. So it was just amusing to me that after 15 years, I finally got to do a Q&A with people on what I had studied in my master's. So I think I'll end it there, and if that's appropriate, and then pass it along to the next person.
All right. No, thank you very much, Mandy, for that, very informative presentation, especially on, getting into government, through the RPL program, which is, kind of one entry point into government, and, really showing that connection between, sort of your degree, thinking about the different, competencies that you need from, writing, communication, to analytical skills that have served you well throughout your career, which I think is really important. And that nice little anecdote about how your MA finally came into relevance at a very important moment, especially in front of your deputy minister and minister, which is, I think, super great to hear. So what I want to do now is, so once again, if you have any questions that are pressing, please please feel free to put them down in the chat, or you can use also conventional pen and paper or pencil to jot them down as well. But now I want to turn things over to Andrew Mackenzie and hear about his experience at Statistics Canada.
Sure, thank you very much. So I don't think you realized it when you planned this, but Blair, Mandy, and I are going to complement each other really well. That not only do we have very different experiences, but I think our approaches are very complementary as well. So I hope everyone enjoys this. So hello, everyone. It's my pleasure to do this. I've tried to be a good alumni and stay in touch and help fellow students of Carleton over the years. So I'll give you a bit of background, and then I'm going to sort of walk you through my story and my observations over the past 22 years. So my current assignment, I'm Associate Director for Vaccine Safety Surveillance Division at the Public Health Agency of Canada. Normally, I work in the Center for Surveillance Applied Research, but I've been reassigned because of the pandemic. Vaccine safety is a major priority right now, as everybody can guess, I'm sure. So I'll walk you through my story and getting up to the executive level, and I'll share my tips and tricks along the way. It's really a mix of luck, taking people's advice and hard work, but definitely with an emphasis on luck. That I've been very fortunate to get where I am. And as I walk you through my story, I think you're probably going to agree. So the story of my career in the federal government starts with a statistics course in the first term of my master's degree in fall 1999. One day, just by total luck, I sat next to someone and we got chatting before the class started. They mentioned they were struggling with some of the concepts, so I invited them to join a study group that had formed with a few other students in the class. And that went really well, and everyone got along great. We had another winter term stats course with mostly the same students, and so the study group continued. What I didn't know at the time was the person I had invited to join this group was an analyst from Statistics Canada that was just trying to upgrade their skills on their own time, sort of evenings kind of thing. And a few weeks into the winter term, they offered me a summer student position at Statistics Canada. And so this was my first major break just by complete and total luck. But that summer, I learned a lot about sort of getting a foot into the government, getting established, getting a contract for once I finished being a student, and then ultimately a permanent job. And so the key thing that a lot of people don't realize about getting a summer student or any term student job with the government is you need to start really early. And same thing for contracts. That most staffing happens probably 4 months in advance because they've got to go through things like security checks and all the human resources verifications and processes. So it takes a long time. I always feel bad when I get emails from students, late April looking for something to start in May. And I have to tell them, you're 4 months late. Even right now, this is late January. I've already hired 7 of the 8 students that I'm going to have this coming summer. So start early. And the next key point is stay calm during the interview. That so many of the students come in and they're just fluttering. They're super nervous. No matter what happens in that interview, nobody's going to die. So just remain calm. I get that people really want it, but you need to put your best foot forward. And so just realize that this is not the most important thing that's ever going to happen to you. So be confident, but not arrogant. I will share a funny kind of anecdote. About 10 years ago, I was doing interviews for summer students, and one guy, he did pretty well. And he said to me at the end of the interview, I think this went really well, so you can just cancel all the rest of your interviews and hire me right now. And so I said to him, well, good thing it's not up to you. And he didn't get the job. So definitely want to be confident, but not arrogant. And if you're going down the road of, say, a data type position, so whether it's a data analyst or a database manager, those types of jobs. So these are going to be very different from the experience that Mandy has described. So if they're looking for analysts, they're probably going to present you with, say, a table of numbers. And the last thing they want to hear is that, this number is higher than that one, or this number went down over time. I could train a chimpanzee to do that. What they really want to know is what's the story behind the numbers. And I'm going to give one example they used 20 years ago. They don't use it anymore, which is why I'm going to share it. And so we used to present students with a set of tables. And so one of them would be the smoking rate coming out of a health survey over the last 10 years. The next one would be tax revenues from tobacco sales over the past 10 years. And then the third row would be tobacco manufacturing over the past 10 years. And so on the health survey, the smoking rate is going down, the tax revenues are flat, and the manufacturing is going up. And so what we're expecting the students to say is not, this one is going up over time and this one's going down over time. We want them to call into question, say that, these are going in opposite directions, and then start theorizing about what could possibly be going on here. Are people lying on the health survey? Is the tobacco that's being manufactured being exported out of the country? Are the tax rates changing? That's the type of analysis that we want to see coming out of that, my kids can tell me what numbers are higher or lower. And then the other important lesson I learned that summer was the importance of learning French and learning SAS. I'm from just outside the GTA in Toronto, so I had minimal French when I arrived in the federal government, and it's been a long, painful struggle because to get to the manager level, you need to be bilingual. There are very few exceptions if you're in a specialist position, maybe, but those are very rare. So if you don't speak French, I suggest learning it as soon as you can, because it takes a long time. And also SAS. So one of the key things that may help me transition from a student to a temporary contract, sort of bridging the gap between a student and a permanent job, was I just happened to be a good SAS programmer. And I didn't even realize it at the time. It was just something that I just naturally picked up. But every time that I applied to a job or I sent my CV to a manager or something, the moment they saw SAS on my CV, I had a job. And it served me well. R is getting to be as common as SAS, but SAS is still by far the most popular. We're used to having to train students with SAS or R, or sorry, SPSS or R or Stata. But the federal government has invested tens of millions of dollars in SAS servers and SAS training institutes and all those kinds of things. So SAS is still going to be the dominant survey or statistical package for years to come. Okay, and so from that student job, I made lots of connections. And so I paid attention to, what were the important projects, the mission critical projects, what were the projects with big budgets? Because if the project that I was working on, if they only had budget for a summer student, but they couldn't afford students through the fall term or the winter term, these big projects usually can. And so at Statistics Canada, these are the ones that make it on the news. At the first Friday of every month, you're going to see the labor force survey on the news with the unemployment rate and the employment numbers. That project has a license to print money in the basement at StatsCan. They're always looking for students. They always have 5 or 6 students minimum every term. And so if labor market issues are something that interests you, then I would suggest reaching out to them. But that's just one example. The big health surveys, they also have healthy budgets that can have students all the time. So whatever field you're in, try to figure out what is the biggest project on the block that involves data, if that's where you want to go, and then apply to that project. And when you're reaching out to these managers, I get probably somewhere in the neighborhood of 30 or 40 resumes a week. And so many of them are just, dear sir, madam, I would be a valuable addition to your company. So clearly they're not thinking about who they're applying to. I like to think that Andrew Mackenzie it's pretty easy to figure out that I'm a sir, not a ma'am. And that obviously the federal government is not a company. So I just delete those without even looking at them. But when I get one where somebody says, hello, Andrew, or hello, Dr. Mackenzie, or whatever, I'm really interested. And then they go in, just 1 or 2 sentences explaining that, what project I work on, and you've made that connection with me so that I know you're not just doing the shotgun approach and sending out thousands of resumes, hoping one of them's going to catch on somewhere, that you're legitimately, or at least you're making me think anyway, that you're legitimately interested in my project. And so that really attracts me to candidates as well. And so I give that advice on to people. And so you want to try and make connections, whether it's, as a student or on a contract somehow. I recognize it's way more difficult virtually. You're not going to run into people, in the kitchen or at the coffee maker or the water fountain or whatever. So it's definitely more difficult, but people are still meeting up. They'll meet up for a drink on a Friday afternoon when the bars are open anyway, not during a pandemic. And it doesn't have to be a bar or something, but people meet up for team lunches. They go for, walks in parks or whatever. So try to make connections and try to stick out and be memorable. As I've moved up in the government, my network, I'm not a shy person. I'm always happy to meet people, make connections. So my network has helped me grow. And even when I left Stats Canada almost 4 years ago to move to the Public Health Agency of Canada, it was because of my network. They had a specific sort of new project they wanted to get off the ground. It was part of their ongoing strategic plan for the next 10 years. And they thought I'd be a good fit. And so I was offered the director level position to move over to the public health agency from StatsCan. And in between, even my network, it helped me move to New York City and work at the United Nations for a year. So it's those types of things. Never, miss an opportunity to expand your network, because it really has helped me over my career. And so maybe I'll end it there, because that's pretty much as up to date as you're going to get.
Well, thank you very much, Andrew, for that very informative presentation. Also, once again, talking about the importance of who you sit next to in a class can have like important repercussions for your career, which I think is a great story and great anecdote. And I also like how you emphasize the importance of building, maintaining your network, and how that is absolutely key and essential to enabling your progress within the government as well. So thank you very much. And then once again, if you have any questions, you can save them, write them down, put them in the chat, and then we can talk about them once our final speaker has finished presenting. And so our last presenter is Christine Piche, and once again, she graduated from the Department of Sociology in 2018, and now works for Design, Innovation, Science, and Economic Development Canada. So we'd love to hear from you, Christine.
Yeah, thanks for having me today. Happy to be here. And yeah, so I'm pretty new in my career in government. I graduated in 2018 from my PhD. I'm an analyst, as noted, at Innovation, Science, and Economic Development Canada, the Digital Design Branch, and more specifically, the Design and Experimentation Center of Expertise. I'm always trying to keep all the names straight in my head, which is a skill you develop in government. My role on the team, it's a multidisciplinary team, and I'm a qualitative researcher on the team. I began in September 2019, so it's been about 2.5 years. And I'll kind of just give the background story of how I got there, and then a few kind of things that pop out to me in thinking about my journey. And a lot of the things that Mandy and Andrew were saying, I was just had my camera off, but I was nodding in agreement, because definitely really important points being raised. So I graduated in 2018. Before I began in government, I did a limited term appointment in the Department of Sociology and Anthropology. It was on a part-time basis. And I taught a few courses, and I was the graduate career transitions mentor at the time. And at the time, so I was just kind of looking for both academic and non-academic jobs, applying to both. I was interested in government. I was looking online on the website to see, like just the government website, to see what the postings were. I applied to a couple. I guess at least for the positions I applied for at the time, it's a pretty lengthy and could take a long time type of process. There was written exams and interviews. And one of them, I did the written exam, and I realized I wasn't a good fit for that particular position. They were looking more so like health sciences instead of a sociology of health type of background. And the other one, I got invited to the interview, and after doing the written exam, but the timing just wasn't right at the time. I just found out I would be doing a second year of the limited term appointment, and I wanted to be able to continue doing that at the time. But it was kind of like a debate of, should I go to the interview? Should I not? Definitely, was worried, what if another opportunity in government doesn't pop up? But that was just kind of the right thing for me at the time. And then in summer of 2019, so I finished my first year of my limited term appointment to begin my second one. And a friend of mine who works in ISED, Innovation, Science, and Economic Development Canada, we also really like acronyms in government. She was about to go on mat leave. And she told me that they were looking for someone on her team to fill the mat leave position. And they were basically looking for someone who had a qualitative background. She said, if you're interested, it'd be a good opportunity. You should apply. And I did. I had the interview. I told them I'm still teaching right now part-time, and they were able to accommodate that and offer me a part-time casual contract, which worked out really well. At the time, I was really busy, but it worked out well in that I could balance the two and I could get my foot in the door of government and kind of see how it is without necessarily diving right in first. And so the digital design branch, at first I was like, I don't know if maybe this is the area for me. Like, I don't have a digital design background. My thesis was in the area of occupational health from a sociological lens. I was looking at kind of like competing health claims and health controversies, competing knowledge claims and health controversies. I didn't really know anything about digital design, but I had the qualitative background. I had the research and analytical, writing skills and all that. And that proved to be really useful in my position. And I really enjoyed when I was doing what I was doing. So when the casual contract was up, they asked me, would you like to continue staying? I didn't take the mat position over, so you came back too, and they offered the second position. And I said, yeah, I'd be interested in staying. And I think the process was they had to list the position internally. Other people could apply too, but my skill set was really a good match for that one as well. And throughout the time that I spent on my casual contracts, I learned about digital design methodology and all that as well too. So that was something I learned through the process of doing those casual contracts. And then in August 2020, I began full-time. And the timing kind of worked out really well because August 2020, I was also finishing my limited term appointment. And then I began a week after full-time in the government. And yeah, that's how I got there. A few kind of things, just kind of thinking back about it. So one, the importance of networking, and just the person who told me about it, she was a former PhD student. We had the same supervisor. I think she was a year or two ahead of me, in cohort, but we met when I first came to visit Carleton. She kind of showed me around, and we just kind of knew each other throughout the PhD. And so kind of keeping those connections, making connections. It doesn't necessarily have to be, making a ton of connections, but just letting people know that you're interested in working in government, for example, if you're interested in getting your foot in the door. So networking is really important. And also just kind of being open to things that you might not necessarily think is a good fit for you. I think if I was just scanning the government job postings and I saw something for digital design, I might have glossed over it. But because that person told me, hey, there's this opportunity, are you interested? You should apply. I did apply and I did end up getting it. So I think what Mandy was saying, you're more than your thesis. I brought a skill set they were looking for, even though what I do has nothing to do with my thesis, and I haven't had much opportunity to bring my thesis into it. But yeah, I do research, I do writing, I write up ethics informed consent and kind of give feedback about that and all that. So a lot of the skills I developed throughout my PhD and through teaching as well have been very useful in this position. Yeah, so being open to things and things that might not necessarily seem like they could be a good fit. And sometimes they're not. When I applied for the other position and they were looking for the health sciences background, and that's not me, but I wouldn't have known unless I applied. So you don't know until you do apply and see if you're a good fit or not. And then With French, I definitely agree it is important. I'm still at the beginning of my government career. I also grew up in Toronto, and French was minimal growing up in Toronto. I am taking French classes right now. You don't necessarily need French to get into the government, but it is important to learn at some point. So I would definitely, just kind of emphasize that as well. Yeah, I think that's 10 minutes. So that is my story of getting in.
All right. No, thank you very much, Christine. I think, that's a really great story in terms of like, like not necessarily expecting that you would be a good fit with government and then realizing that you had a very, particular skill set that, goes beyond. And like that saying, like, that you are more than your thesis, I think is a good thing to think. And I'll definitely be using that in my supervision with some of my grad students. So what I want to do now is open up the floor to, questions, comments, from some of our people who are in this session with us. So, if you have any questions, feel free to turn on your camera and ask a question of, any one of our speakers. So yeah, you can go ahead right now. All right, so I think I'll ask a question. One of the things that came up was the importance of French. And so in terms of French, I know some of you mentioned that you grew up in the GTA, but what kind of opportunities for learning French are there, once you enter the government?
Maybe I can start that one. It really depends on which department you land in. That some departments are much more committed to supporting their employees learning French than others. And my two examples are, my sample size is two, but at StatsCan, they have a French training institute. The moment you start there, you get a French evaluation if you want one. And they'll sign you up for part-time language training and develop a language training plan and those kinds of things, where in fact, the employees are expected to learn French on their own time. They will arrange for people that they deem to be high trajectory employees, they will arrange for part-time training for you, but it's not nearly as organized and universal as it is at Stats Canada.
Okay. Mandy, I saw yours.
Yes, I guess maybe my answer is, I wouldn't say it's unique, but it does sort of show the spectrum of what's available. I was at Canadian Heritage, and I didn't have any French, which in Canadian Heritage, the requirement to be bilingual kicks in pretty early due to its role with official languages. But due to my subject matter expertise, I got quite high as an English, what they call an English essential employee. But I became a part of the talent management program. And so they, which at the time was, decided by senior management in the department. And I was sent on full-time, one-on-one language training for 3.5 months. And I was able to obtain my levels at that point. So there's a real spectrum, but I totally agree with Andrew. I mean, I left Canadian Heritage and then I went to CERNAC, and my colleagues were taking French 2 hours a week on a Friday afternoon. Right. So there's really quite a bit of a spectrum. I would say part of it, does depend a bit on demonstrating that it's a contribution on the part of the public service to invest in you to learn French. For me, in order to get that dedicated, like I said, it's not common, but I wouldn't say it's rare per se. But the 3.5 months one-on-one with the French language, I had to commit on my own time how I was going to complement that. So I had to, present to my director general, okay, just like it was a simple plan, but it got me my language, and it was saying that, I will watch these, these 2 shows during the week in order to increase my audio French, these 2 news programs in French. I will commit to buying my own workbooks for grammar and these sorts of things. And it was to demonstrate that I was equally committed to doing so, because it's not a cheap investment. But that's sort of how I got through my French. That was a great opportunity.
Okay. Yeah. No. Yeah, Christine.
Yeah, I was just gonna say for me, it's the 3 hours of French on a Tuesday morning type of thing. But yeah, so we have these opportunities within my department.
Okay. No, that's good. No, I think it's important to have these opportunities as well, because like you never know also whether your minister will be French or your deputy minister will be French, and that will also influence your importance of French language. So Maddie, just raise your hand.
Sorry, I think another important point though is that many departments have sort of internal programs in place where people volunteer to be a language buddy, whereby you get set up with an Anglophone or a Francophone, and you can practice in a safe environment by having, well, now it would be, MS Team lunches or that sort of thing. If you don't have sort of a network of Anglophones or Francophones that you can practice with, there's language buddy programs in most departments.
Okay, yeah, which I think is also very important, because that conversational level French is also very important, or English. All right, so I saw that in the chat that Yupeng had previously raised her or turned on her camera. So we'll address the question by Yupeng and then by Zubair. So could you turn on your camera? We can't hear you. We can't hear you. So we're having some audio problems, Yupeng.
Okay now?
Yeah, now it's good.
Oh, hi. Hi everyone. I just have a quick question. It's like I was wondering, because for me, I'm a international from China. So I don't know in the future, is there have any chance for me to find a job in government? Does that make sense?
Okay, Mandy, do you want to address that one?
So when it comes to student positions, it's usually not an issue, at least in the departments that I've worked for whether it's and same thing with casual terms, which are usually 4 months minus a day. However, that for indeterminate permanent positions, many of them will have Canadian citizens as well as some other categories as priorities for hiring. So it is a little bit more, it is a little bit more tricky. I know the RPL program does the same sort of prioritization as well.
So it's get a little bit limited by not as a Canadian citizen. Okay, I see. Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much.
And I can comment for Statistics Canada and Public Health Agency of Canada. So that even for the students, they are required to be a Canadian citizen or a permanent resident. That they do require proof of citizenship or permanent residency before they'll issue a letter of offer to start the job.
Thank you very much.
Okay, well, so thank you for that question, Yupeng. And so now we have a question from Zubair, and he puts in the chat, Andrew mentioned SaaS, a SaaS server. What exactly is a SaaS server?
Sure. So a SaaS server is basically a server that's been constructed and it has SaaS installed onto it. And so they're typically very powerful. I mean, even at StatsCan, these things would have terabytes of RAM and 16 processors and all kinds of crazy stuff. And so it's designed to take the stress off the personal computers, and it works in conjunction with a SaaS grid. So at Stats Canada, they have all of SaaS is installed, at least in the background, on all 5,000 computers in the main building. Well, in the main complex, there's 3 buildings. And so you could be working away, say an administrative assistant that has nothing to do with data analysis. In the background, SaaS will be running and it'll be crunching data in conjunction with this SaaS server to result in much faster analysis times. This is especially useful for time-sensitive projects like the labor force survey, that has less than a week to go from raw data collected from people to being on the news. And so they need very quick analysis, as well as the census. When you've got, nearly 40 million records that need to be analyzed, that could take days, if not weeks. And I still remember when they went from running SAS in your computer. I'm old enough and have enough gray hair. This would have been in the early 2000s. It used to take 2 to 3 days to run some of the models I wanted to run. And this was on a data set that had about 130,000 observations. And then when they brought in the SAS grid and the SAS servers, that turned into about 12 seconds. So it just shows you how much more powerful this thing is. It's also hugely expensive, which is why the government's not going to walk away from SAS anytime soon.
I think when I were all in awe of the power of computing, I must admit, I was like, wow, that's pretty awesome. As a person who studies science and technology, I was like, wow, that is impressive computing power. I guess building from our, the previous discussion where we brought in some undergraduate students who recently got jobs following their undergraduate degree. One of the things that they had mentioned was the importance of, both the importance of, maintaining and building networks, although they stressed the real importance of something like LinkedIn. So in the case of government jobs, does LinkedIn have the same kind of importance, would you say, or more about your personal connections, your networks more in the contemporary era? So how does that particular platform play into government jobs?
Mandy or Christine, do you want to take that? I feel like I'm dominating the answer period. I've got an answer, but I don't want it. I'll let you go first.
Go ahead, Christine.
I think, am I off mute? Yeah. I think LinkedIn is important. One of my colleagues recently, he did like a team meeting where he talked about LinkedIn and how it's a useful tool, especially if you're more introverted, how it's something you can tap into. And yeah, I remember too, before I got my government job, when I was applying to non-academic jobs, it was common when I was applying for the person when I was interviewing that they would like add me or follow me on LinkedIn as well. So I think it's good to have a profile in my experience, and others have spoken to the value of it. So I think it is good to have a LinkedIn profile. But yeah, that's just based on my experience.
Okay, thanks, Christine. Mandy?
I was just going to say that there are some creative HR departments out here in the federal government. I will not say that it is consistent or widespread, but there are some creative ones that are actually using LinkedIn postings to recruit for term positions or for casuals or for students. So I know that it's come up. For example, when I was at Parks, they were seeking expanded sort of HR policy authority to be able to use some of these different social media networking. You'll see the same thing with Facebook, and I'll just say Facebook and LinkedIn. I mean, I've gotten 4 resumes this week based on a posting somebody on my team did on Facebook.
Okay, that's interesting. And Andrew.
Yeah, so the Public Health Agency, when the pandemic started, they didn't have nearly enough staff, and so we've more than doubled since it started. And so the HR team was combing through LinkedIn, looking for people that looked to be nearing the end of their studies, recent graduates, or even newly in the workforce. And we hired right across Canada. So it is a great example of LinkedIn being used. But that was mostly by our HR team. I don't usually comb through LinkedIn myself. And I'll admit that if I get sort of a random invitation to connect from someone I've never heard of, I will ignore it. That if someone wants to connect with me, if they just take a couple of minutes to introduce themselves, explain why they think we should connect, that's then I'll definitely consider it. But just sort of random invitations to connect with no message and I don't know them, then I'm going to ignore it.
Yeah. Okay. That's very good. Oh, all right. So I'll thank you everyone for answering that question on LinkedIn. And so now we have Ansu, who asked a question: how should we prepare ourselves for applying to government job? Is it any different from applying to non-government jobs? Mandy.
I would say it's vastly different. And there is I mentor quite a few younger public servants that have gotten into the public service, but then aren't quite sure how to make their next step in their career move. As Christine had mentioned, it can be quite a lengthy process. But I guess it's twofold. One is that you need to really critically pay attention to the job poster, because it's a union-based organization, and even though the appeals aren't necessarily allowable in your process, if there's somebody who is within government who makes an appeal against the process, I mean, there are strict rules about how you do assessments. So it's called the Statement of Merit Criteria. And so they will say quite explicitly, please state in your cover letter how you meet each of the essential qualifications and where. If you miss one, you're out. So there's not a second chance here, and there's not a way to make up for something at the interview. So you have to, and I tell people, I know it sounds pretty redundant, but I even did this for the RPL program when I applied. It was like, state that they wanted to know this. I put it right in there as the title, told them how I had that, where I had it, and for how long, and then went that through everyone, like every single essential qualification, including your education, and including maybe if they ask for assets, to do so right up front. And double, triple check it to make sure you don't miss one. That's a big difference, because you won't get to the next stage of doing the exam if you don't do so. And then I would say for the second part, for the exam, they will tell you what you're being tested on, right? Knowledge of this, knowledge of that. That's what you're going to be tested on. You don't know how you're going to be tested on that, but that's what you study on top of what you know already. You go in and you study exactly. If it says knowledge of X department's priorities, well, then you go and you research what are identified in the mandate letter or the Liberal platform as priorities for that department. That'll be an expectation. So it can be quite structured that way. And then finally, for the interview, they will also tell you in the interview what it is they are going to assess you on. And I think the last comment I would make is to be mindful throughout the whole process. You will be assessed on your oral and written communications. In many cases, you'll even see something that says all communications and every part of this process will be assessed, and that includes emails. I have seen a process where there's been a little bit of combative emails. Well, that became a part of the assessment. So I think I'll just end it there. But they give you a plan. The Statement of Merit Criteria is your plan to prepare, and you just have to make sure that at each step of the way, you read very carefully what they're telling you have to do, and you make sure that that's what you do.
Thank you, Mandy. Do Andrew or Christine want to add to that?
I'm just going to underline that Mandy gave an outstanding answer, that she's absolutely right. And in the Statement of Merit Criteria, or the SOMC they call it, yeah, go through line by line. And if it says explain how your education is appropriate for this position or whatever, don't just say see my resume or something like that. Because if you don't write it explicitly in the cover letter and just write see my resume or something like that, you're out, because it's not in the cover letter. So it's gonna seem very repetitive, very robotic, and Mandy's trick is exactly what I use. That if the SOMC says, describe your experience managing human and financial resources, that's the bullet, And then in the next paragraph or two, I describe exactly my experience doing that activity. And then I go to the next line of the statement of merit criteria. That's my bullet. And then I describe how I do it. And that's the pattern that I've seen people use successfully. You have to, and the other thing to keep in mind is that it's going to be, a human resources consultant or advisor or someone in the HR department most often that's going to be reading this. So avoid jargon and acronyms and language that's not clear. Pretend like you're explaining it to your grandmother or someone that has never worked in government, doesn't have your education. Explain it very clearly and concisely, or there's a good chance you're going to get kicked out, and there is no appeals, and you don't go to the next stage. And the only other thing that Mandy said that I really liked is that, yeah, every interaction throughout the entire hiring process is going to be considered in the decision to hire. That a major emphasis has been put on suitability, ability to work with teams. They don't want people that are going to come in and cause all kinds of conflict and trouble. So if someone is, say, really combative with the administrative assistant that's trying to schedule an interview with the director and their team or something, that's going to get mentioned to the director, and your candidacy could be stopped right there just because you were rude to the administrative assistant. So be on your best performance at all times.
Thank you, Andrew. Christine.
Yeah, just as someone who's recently gone through that, I definitely agree. Just making sure you read everything very carefully, that you are explaining it in detail. It took time to do and go through it and make sure everything was communicated clearly. It's not something you can kind of just quickly put together and send off. So prepare to take time to do it and make sure you're going through it, you're reading what is being asked of you, and you're clearly communicating that in detail.
Okay, thank you. So we have another question in the chat from Jasmine. What departments are most common for anthropology undergraduate degrees?
I think for me, I would say it depends what you're studying in anthropology. I mean, I think it really quite varies. I mean, I wouldn't want to say limit yourself to CERNAC and Canadian Heritage or Parks. I mean, they've done international development. Okay. Well, interestingly, that sort of could be cross-cutting across departments in the sense that, yes, you've got global affairs and you've got the programming there. But when I was at Parks, I was also responsible for international affairs for the agency. And there are pockets of development opportunities across departments. It's not, global affairs does not own the entire territory on international relations or on international development. They may be the flagship, but as Blair knows, I mean, I work at CERNAC and I'm involved in the Pope visit. So I'm not sure why exactly. So carefully read your job description to understand what you're signing up for. But I think it's a cross-cutting issue. And I'll let maybe Andrew speak to that as well, but you'll see it in the health component. You'll see it at Indigenous Services Canada. Almost every department has an international affairs directorate right across the board.
Yeah, and even in the health field, I mean, between StatsCan and FAC, I have encountered anthropologists. They sort of really brought sort of a qualitative approach to understanding health. For example, at Stats Canada, they were the ones that would take the health surveys out to do field testing and qualitative interviews with people to make sure that the questions are really being understood the way that the authors of the questions wrote them. A good example was there was a question in a disability survey in the late 90s. It went something along the lines of, are you able to stand in line for at least 20 minutes? And they thought they were measuring someone's physical ability to maintain a standing position in a line. But what that question was really measuring was people's patience, because people, when they actually did the qualitative testing, people would say, no, I'm just going to get ticked off and leave after 20 minutes. I'm not waiting that long. So that type of understanding is very helpful, and just by, again, luck, I guess, often it's anthropologists with a qualitative training that end up doing that type of work.
I have a quick question here. Mandy mentioned the policy leaders program, and Andrew, you mentioned when you hire people, by now, for your summer jobs. Where do students find these opportunities? Policy leaders need to be in a PhD program or with a PhD, I understand. But if you have any suggestions of if you are looking for a job, be it a graduate student or undergraduate student, for casual or summer jobs or even permanent jobs. I know, Christine, you've gone through this recently, so I would like to hear all your thoughts on this. Would be helpful.
Do you want to start, Christine?
I mean, for me, I was looking before someone told me of my opportunity. It was just the online Government of Canada site. So I can't really speak to the other programs since I didn't apply to them. Yeah.
Well, I can speak to some of them. That the website, they used to have a great website. It was so easy to memorize. It's not this website now, but the link, the last time I checked, it still worked, and it would take you where you need to go. It was jobs.gc.ca. So now they've centralized it all into one central website. But if you punch in jobs.gc.ca, it'll take you where you want to go. And I think somebody put it up in the chat. And so you want to look at two different possibilities. So if you're still a student, you want to look for something called FSWEP. This is the Federal Student Work Experience Program. And so the criteria for FSWEP is you have to be a student between terms. So if you're, say, if you're graduating in April, you can't be a summer student in FSWEP because you're not going back to school in the fall. You have to be going back to school in the term after your FSWEP term. If you're graduating, then you want to be looking for a different section. It's the recruitment programs. And that was how I got into Statistics Canada. When I was paying attention to recruitment programs, September was the big month. And this past year, StatsCan did still post their recruitment program in September. I think that federal departments have been moving to more of a year-round type recruitment model, but the last I looked, there were still a number of postings in September, because it still takes them 6-8 months to actually do all of the evaluations. Because the first step, this is something that hasn't actually been mentioned, so maybe I'll mention it now. The first step at least Public Health Agency and StatsCan anyways, is a social media scan. And so if you have strong, say, anti-government opinions or what have you, or offensive opinions on your social media page, that's going to get picked up before your resume even gets a single pair of eyeballs looking at it at Stats Canada or FAC. So pay attention to that and keep that in mind. From there, they could do a written interview, they could do, a written exam, they could do standardized testing, they can do multiple interviews. So all that stuff, usually it takes 6-8 months for the full recruitment program. The benefit of going through that process, though, is in the recruitment programs, they also often have a development program. And so there will be sort of standardized training that you're going to go through, and that's everything from sort of training to do the work you're being hired to do, as well as language training and giving presentations and writing and all kinds of other things. So they're definitely worth the difficulty, but they can be a lot of work, and they only open for a narrow window sometimes. Sometimes they'll be open for 6 months. Other times they'll be open for 3 weeks, and that's it for a year. You have to wait another year or a year minus 3 weeks for it to open up again.
Mandy.
So at the risk of dating myself, but I did several FSWEP positions well before I joined government. I was consistently doing them before I was on SHRC and OGS and on all of the departmental scholarships. And so I had positions from two ways. One was from FSWEP, and I think the first one I ever had was Industry Canada at the time, and it was the aerospace program. And at the end of the summer, when I said, why did you hire an anthropologist for the aerospace program? And they said, you're the only one in the interview who talked about research. So, I mean, it was interesting. I mean, it was a really nicely well-paying job for the summer. But I did SWEPs, but also at the time, Carleton actually put up job posters on behalf of the federal government. And so I would say half of them I did through SWEP, and the other half were based on job posters that I saw while I was a student at Carleton. And I applied directly, and they would offer me a 4-month less a day casual. So it was 50-50. I know that's something that you're working on on Blair, but I mean, that connection with critical people in the government would also benefit. As I said, I would just go to the Carleton Career Center and look for job postings and apply there. And the difference is that there's a difference in rates between a 4-month casual and a student. So there are different possibilities in the range of salary and pay, but it was one of the stepping stones to make me competitive in RPL, because I could say I had done all of these different policy positions within government that, you know, outside of academia. Co-ops as well. I mean, if there's opportunities for internships or co-ops to be built in anywhere, like these are great opportunities. And as Christine mentioned, I had a student we hired for the summer. We immediately went from the student SWEP contract to a 12-hour-a-week part-time position. We've now signed him on for the 3rd term for another part-time. He's coming back next summer, and you know, he's just on a roll. And he's on his 3rd placement within my team, doing research on cemeteries and burials work using historical and archival documents.
Many thanks.
Okay. So does anyone have any other questions about, you know, making that transition from your sociology or anthropology degree into the government? And I think it was good talking about the SWEP, different, you know, RPL program, different options that you can go in through government. All right, so I think if there's no further questions, I think we'll, you know, thank our 3 speakers, you know, Mandy, Andrew, and Christine, for, you know, some very fascinating insights on, you know, how to you know, work your way into government, but I think also very important career advice in terms of, you know, maintaining, developing, you know, contacts and networks, which is also a key element of, you know, building a career within the public service as well. So thank you very much for your great insights this evening.
You're welcome.
Many thanks. I learned a ton.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you,
Don't
guys.
hesitate to reach out if you ever have questions.
Thanks so much.
And it was good to see you again.
You too.
All right. Well, thanks everyone, and have a great evening.
Thank you.
Thanks, Carlos. Take care.
Good night.
All right.
Thank you, Carlos.
Bye-bye.
Good night.
Bye.